Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the reports that there is considerable optimism for a Brexit deal, despite the pessimistic mood in official statements, but also to wonder if the reports are right to be optimistic, or are they making the mistake of assuming that this optimism is based on the fact that Boris Johnson will actually be sensitive to political realities and cannot afford to leave the EU without a deal. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So there's various reports now, it's quite widespread, even in the Brexit supporting media, talking about a deal. Not all of these reports are necessarily in favour of such a deal emerging, but I'm going to focus on two that would support a Brexit deal and what are their sources of optimism. So someone writes in the Financial Times, for example, at the weekend, this is someone with experience in the EU, not just a political correspondent, someone who's actually got experience of being the heart of the EU in terms of trade, and has noted a couple of reasons for optimism on their part. The first is that they note that there are no major players opposed to a Brexit deal. They accept that there are noisy players, as they term it, against a deal, but that they have no power. The people who have the power over the process are, even if they're not fully in favour of a deal, they are at least not opposed to a deal. Now, they didn't really go into details in terms of identifying all these different players. Nigel Farage would be an obvious noisy player in this context. If and when a deal is struck, he will castigate Johnson for selling out. He's already laid the groundwork for doing that. But what do they think about senior members of the pro-Brexit ERG within the Conservative Party? Are these the noisy players? They seem to think so. They seem to think so. I mean, they don't have to have a say in it, it has to be said. So from that point of view, they have no power because they voted away, bafflingly, they voted away any right to influence the deal months ago. Now, from their point of view, what they actually thought they were voting for was to keep the details of the US trade deal secret, which they did. And they were just working on the assumption that Boris Johnson wouldn't sell us out on the Brexit deal. But the reality of what they voted for means that if Boris Johnson agrees to a Brexit deal, he doesn't have to let his MPs vote on it. He can agree terms with the EU. The EU Parliament have to vote on it, although there's no time to do that properly before the end of the transition period now. But there's a suggestion that it could still be implemented and ratified later. But the EU Parliament are going to at some point need to vote for their deal. But the more democratic Brexit Britain, no, we don't, even our own Parliament doesn't get a vote on it. We, the people, certainly don't get a vote on it. Even Parliament doesn't, even MPs don't. They provided with Boris Johnson a nice shiny rubber stamp to do whatever he likes. So if it turns out that they don't like it, well, they only have themselves to blame. The second reason for optimism, according to this person, is that the US politics is, and this is certainly something I would agree with, US politics is now aligned with the notion of an EU trade deal. Now, with Donald Trump's administration, it was very clear you can have a US trade deal or you can have an EU trade deal, but you can't have both. Now, this line has been burned to ash now. In fact, getting a trade deal with the EU is not only compatible with the possibility of a US deal at some point, doesn't look like Biden's going to be in a massive hurry for it, but at some point, but it is almost a prerequisite, especially given the particular importance of Ireland regarding a trade deal, with all parts set to be badly affected if one were not arranged. That being said, the author of the piece also identified two possible banana skins. One, what the author terms hostage takers. So, for example, smaller European economies who see a bargain to be struck for their support. Now, this is all quite normal, for example, in trade talks. Mostly they're arranged by the larger economies in the EU. That's how it works, really. The small bit players, when it comes to a matter where they could veto it, like, for example, a trade deal, maybe they use that as an opportunity to get a few shiny things themselves. So, for example, Spain and Gibraltar, but the EU know their members, of course, they're not going to get caught out by this. They'll already have plans in place to deal with it. In fact, at this late stage, given that now if a deal is agreed, there's not going to be very much time for internal bickering in the EU, I would imagine they've already sorted it out with general agreements with governments to avoid a last minute, hurdle sinking the whole project. Because I don't know how Brexit is going to end in 2020. I don't even know what we're gonna be talking about Brexit wise next week, whether we'll have a deal or not, or if we don't have a deal, will we be saying it's definitely no deal, or will we be having another week of crucial talks? I don't know. But something that won't have been on anyone's Brexit bingo this year will have been the UK and the EU agreeing a trade deal only for an EU member to block it at the last minute. Embarrassing, wouldn't even come close to covering that. The second thing is the fact that Brexit lacks any sort of logic. Now, again, it's the second point here that is the one that's most in tune with my thinking. Because in the past, the EU have concluded agreements that all parties have been engaged in for their mutual benefit. That's what trade agreements are all about, mutual benefit. It is therefore relatively straightforward to go, okay, here's a problem, let's work out some solutions. This solution works, let's do that. But Brexit is not about mutual benefit. It is about British self-destruction and sticking two fingers up at Europe. This renders it outside of the EU's negotiating experience. It's almost like Britain is negotiating on sufferance. For Brexit supporters, I don't consider this a strength either. It's not, because it's not the UK's experience. It won't so much as they'll be thinking, because the EU are not used to this, it'll wrong foot them into a move that benefits Britain. No, it won't. It'll wrong foot everyone into a move that leads to the accidental no deal if it's allowed to hold sway. But despite the speculations, even on the part of those who have considerable experience at the centre of EU trade, there was another report, a report in The Guardian this time, saying that EU ambassadors have been told that a deal is very, very close now. Now, the main issue for me is it's very difficult to know when the real deadline is now. Because in order to have got a deal ratified properly, according to the original timetable, it needed to be agreed politically by the end of October. Obviously, that date has passed. Then, in order to be properly ratified by the new emergency session of Parliament, so the EU Parliament agreed, well, we'll sit on the 28th of December, which is very decent of them. But even then, we would have needed that political agreement by mid-November. Well, that has now passed. So no one's expecting a deal this week, by the way. We're expecting talks to take place that might agree, and then an announcement maybe at the weekend or maybe early next week. December, maybe. We could actually be sort of into December before anything is actually announced. And once you accept the notion that the EU might agree to a limited deal being implemented before full ratification, then when is the actual deadline? December? And that would seem a bit reckless, but I don't know what's going on in private conversations other than as a result of briefings to journalists. And those briefings are suggesting that a deal is close. But those briefings are from those in the EU, not necessarily those around Boris Johnson. And then you think to yourself, so is it because they genuinely feel that because the outstanding issues every week that goes by the way, there isn't always a major announcement, but the outstanding issues are shrinking. The UK is backing down on position after position. The EU is compromising as well. I'm not trying to bill it as the EU have said, look, we gave you this in February, you're going to sign it or not. No, the EU have compromised on a few things, but the UK has shrunk down its objections to certain things. But there are still some remaining. And so are they going to believe that Boris Johnson knows he can't survive a no-deal Brexit outcome, and so will just fold at the last minute? He just needs to go as late as possible to make out that he got the best possible deal. I don't know that. And also, like I said, what is the last minute? The reports, also talk of what I consider some fairly hefty outstanding points. So, for example, fishing again. It's always bloody fishing. The UK side is refusing to accept dispute resolution for fishing matters, unless, of course, they've agreed that since I've been doing this video. Now, I would, if you'll pardon the expression, consider that a red herring. Because the thing is that there must be some dispute resolution written into the deal. There are other issues with fishing, by the way. It's not just dispute resolution. But this is the most ridiculous one. If you strike an agreement at any level and one side believes that the other has breached the terms of it, obviously there has to be some redress. That's obvious. There has to be some way you can go, some panel, some court, that can offer a verdict on the matter and say, yep, this side did breach the deal, or no, this side didn't breach it, that interpretation is valid. Otherwise, the treaty isn't worth whatever the hell it's written on. And at the same time, do we really believe that the government will accept dispute resolution on every aspect of the deal except for fishing? They just want fishing excluded from this dispute resolution process? Why? They don't give a crap about fishing. It's worth next to nothing to our overall economy. You don't sacrifice the whole economy for fishing. And it isn't big even in Tory heartlands. So I would be amazed if that is the sticking point that stops a deal emerging. At the moment, it's just a very useful, we've got this issue and then these issues. A more serious sticking point is the issue of common standards. So the problem with Brexit is it's all about setting our own rules. But the thing about trade deals is they're all about agreeing to fixed rules, mutually agreeable fixed rules. So if you have a mutually exclusive clash between reality and ideology, you would still expect Johnson to simply fold if he really wants a deal. After all, he said that he would not water down these standards, environmental standards, food standards, worker protections. We know he will. But he said he wouldn't. So if he agreed to the EU standards on this, even if we don't ultimately keep in step with those improvements, if we arrange a deal that says, look, we'll fix these standards in time now, and then we don't have to improve them in step with each other, that's not going against his word to the public. You know, it's the one part of his Brexit promises he can genuinely deliver on. It's the only thing he can deliver on, and yet it's the one thing he doesn't want to deliver on. Personally, I can still see Boris Johnson being paralysed by having to make this Brexit choice, because whatever he chooses, whatever outcome, he's going to face a political assault for it. I think he probably would have avoided a deal if Trump had won the presidential election, or could otherwise have stolen it. But the US dynamic complicates things for the Brexiteers. It may even be that some hardcore MPs who wanted a no-deal outcome recognise the new dynamic and soften their stance. Not all of them, not the likes of Ian Duncan Smith, for example, a man too thick to realise that picking your nose in front of live cameras is not a good look. He's certainly not going to recognise that reneging on international commitments just when you've cut ties with former allies is also not going to be a great look. But as things stand, ultimately all we can do is wait, because ultimately it doesn't matter what is agreed, what negotiations take place. This is all down to Boris Johnson. The deal is there for him if he wants it. He could announce it today, he could announce it tomorrow, he could announce it next week. As soon as he wants to agree to it, it's there. Legal texts have now finally been produced for all areas as far as I understand. So all we can do is just wait for that announcement. Keep an eye on briefings, all very interesting to still discuss the speculation, but we are now just waiting to see what Boris Johnson decides to do. And if he can't make that decision, then it's the accidental no deal. But at the same time, there is that optimism. But those are my thoughts anyway. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.